Shadow of the Erdtree is my favorite video game content ever. It's an absolute masterpiece, housing some of From Software's best bosses, including my favorite boss of all time, some of the best soundtracks, and of course, in classical Elden Ring fashion, the best open world. Exploring the Shadowlands with this incredible structure and a lot of great areas was just a joy and one of my best first playthrough experiences ever. Besides that, Shadow of the Erdtree has an amazing story, incredible characters, great reveals, and so much more. There is just so much to discover, and I will always remember the first playthrough fondly. However, even with all of these amazing features and basically nothing but positives, I still have a few little nitpicks. And in this video, I want to explain what are my 5 biggest issues with Shadow of the Erdtree. And with this explanation out of the way, let's get into the list. Right from the get-go, we start with a pretty minor nitpick of mine. However, I do think this change would actually impact the DLC in a very positive way. And the issue is the Belurat and Enir ilim split. I genuinely just don't understand why they did this, and in my opinion, it's one of the most baffling decisions in the entire expansion. Everything was aligned. You start this amazing DLC by entering Belurat, the Tower Settlement, a very important city of horns and culture, and you end it in Enir ilim, basically the holiest places for the Hornsent, their sanctum, and this is also the place where you find the Divine Gate. Starting basically at the bottom of Hornsent culture and working your way up. Everything would be so easy. However, after you burn the sealing tree, you just get teleported to Enir ilim, and I genuinely just don't understand why. Because after you defeat the Divine Beast Dancing Lion boss in Belurat, you go upstairs and you see that the lift that is later unlocked is obscured by shadow. So why do you not just go there and backtrack and then ascend Enir ilim? It would be so much cooler. Just a very questionable decision. The saddest thing about this is, if these two areas were connected as one, it would be one of the greatest areas in the series and just absolutely incredible. Incredible enemy encounters, atmosphere, level design, and just an awesome architecture. However, with these two areas being split, I think they are both still great in their own right, but it's definitely a bit of missed potential. And tying these two together would just make a lot more sense. But as you can see, overall, it's just a pretty minor nitpick. My second issue with Shadow of the Erdtree are the furnace golems. And yeah, I first off have to say a few positive things about them. I think the furnace golems have an absolutely incredible design, depicting Mesmer's absolute cruel brutality of his crusade and just being amazing set pieces in Shadow of the Erdtree. Seeing them in a distance was amazing, and the size really put an emphasis how big this entire world or DLC is. It was very amazing. And the second amazing thing about them is their loot. They genuinely drop very good things. Now we come with the issue with them. These guys drop amazing loot, which means fighting them would be quite recommended. And the issue is, fighting them is really boring, because these guys are some of the tankiest bosses in the entire series. Now, the way you fight these guys is basically you have to stagger them 3 times until they fall over, and then you can riposte, and then you repeat this entire process. It takes a few minutes and it's pretty boring, but it's doable. However, sometimes these guys get staggered in such a way that you can't perform the riposte, and then the fight takes even longer. And oh my god, I was raging so hard on my first playthrough. These guys unironically made me the angriest in the entire Shadow of the Erdtree expansion, because they are honestly not that engaging. And especially since the second one, where he just starts spamming the fireballs that chase you and waste even more time, I don't like them. I do think that maybe having 1 or 2 of them as a gimmick would be cool, but the fact that they basically become the Erdtree avatars, who are way more fun to fight than these guys, is pretty annoying, because as I said, their drops are actually like really good. Now, I do think it's cool that you can lure all of them to a cliff and kill them with the fire pods, but it takes very long and it's not really making them any more interesting. It's a cool gimmick, but that's really it. So yeah, I warmed up to the furnace golems quite a bit since my first playthrough, no pun intended, but I still think they are a pretty big waste of time and rather annoying and boring instead of really fun. So yeah, not a big fan of these guys. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe and maybe enable your notifications. It helps out the channel massively and I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support. Of course, with Elden Ring's big open world structure and a large world to fill with content, there needs to be some reuse. And that's absolutely no issue for me. I still would consider Elden Ring to have the best boss roster of any game I have ever played. It has a lot of amazing mini bosses and smaller fights, and of course, the remembrances are just top notch. And just like the base game, Shadow of the Erdtree also delivers here. The boss roster is absolutely peak. But I still think we have a few pretty meh or forgettable bosses. I think the Ghost Flame Dragon is a very cute little remix of the base game Flame Dragons, and seeing him was actually really cool, and he was also fun to fight. However, the two other Ghost Flame variants with their ganky nature are some of the most annoying bosses in the series for me, and I really hate them. The NPC boss fight spams in these small tombs is also not really my cup of tea, because I've been pretty vocal about it in the past, but I don't really like NPC fights, and well, these aren't doing it for me either. And for the love of God, FromSoft, the Deathrite Bird, please stop using these enemies. They suck. I hate the Deathrite Bird so much. I think they are an abysmal enemy. The visual clutter is terrible. They have unintuitive attacks. Apparently you avoid the star explosion by looking at the compass needle or something. The Deathrite Birds just never clicked with me, and I never want to learn them. I think they are terrible bosses. And maybe a sad take for the two Hippo engineers out there, but no surprise, I think the Golden Hippo sucks. The lesser versions may be less so, but still, they are just incredibly bland. But I would still consider this a rather minute issue, because first off, the bosses are not too many, and secondly, you can avoid nearly all of them. So what's even the issue? Just cherry pick the bosses you like and forget about the rest. That's what we all did in the base game, so why not in the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion as well? Probably the most frustrating thing about any media is if great or amazing things get tarnished or worsened by bad things in them. And this is probably my personal biggest issue with the DLC as a whole. A few really terrible attacks. Let's start with the obvious one. I think Meteor is a great boss. First, I wasn't too fond of her, but to be honest, fighting her is honestly really fun, and she has some great positioning checks and cool attacks. However, there is one obvious elephant in the room, and this needs to be addressed. If you played the game, you know what I'm talking about. It's the black hole. This attack is just garbage. It's not only basically undodgeable if you're not keeping a distance, besides if you use an Ash of War, it's also an attack that prevents you from sticking to Meteor at all, because the startup is basically unavoidable. It comes out way too quickly and always hits you. It's an absolute nightmare for any Meteor no-hit runs, and basically just forces a very passive fight against her, where you bait out the spinning attack and hit her a few times. So a pretty great and fun boss gets definitely tarnished by it quite a bit. Then another attack I just absolutely despise is Romina's phase 2 transition. This attack is genuinely just incredibly bullshit and unfair, and I have no idea what they were thinking. Why do you make an attack like this? You hit her and she instantly transforms into phase 2. There is no animation like for Godfrey, for example. No, she just instantly starts an AoE in your face. The fix would be so easy. Just make her put her spear in the ground or walk away or something, but no, they did nothing. Then of course we have Bale's bouncing fire, which is just absolutely bullshit, and sadly probably one of the biggest offenders here, because I consider Bale a top 10 boss of all time and my second favorite in Shadow of the Erdtree. So having this amazing boss being tarnished a bit by this terrible bug is very annoying, and I have no idea why this isn't still fixed. It's been an issue for so long. These are honestly my biggest gripes with the bosses in Shadow of the Erdtree, and I'm so glad they fixed the goddamn double slash for PCR, because that attack was terrible. But please, if they just would fix these attacks, it would make these bosses all so much better. I'm not gonna lie, I really had to scratch to really find a lot of issues with Shadow of the Erdtree, because as I already said multiple times, this is my favorite video game content ever. Mesmer is my favorite boss of all time, and the DLC was one of the best first playthrough experiences I ever had in my life. So while I do have some few issues with the DLC, there's nothing really major. I could start talking about stuff like Promised Consort Radahn's arena being a bit wonky, or a few other issues, but it's not really a big deal. What I really want to mention at the end of this video is a few missed potential bosses, because I think Shadow of the Erdtree could have been even better. I think Shadow of the Erdtree has somewhat of a problem with enemies. Now, I do think the enemies that were added are overall amazing, so the quality and quantity is not my issue. My issue is rather how they use it, or rather the lack of it. I think they could have used these enemies way more. I wanted to see more Hornsent warriors, more bird warriors. I wanted to see more aging untouchables in the abyssal woods. Just a lot more of these enemies, because they are so great and I would really like to fight more of them. Another thing I would really wish for is Midra's Legacy Dungeon to be a good bit bigger. It's an absolutely amazing looking set piece with great atmosphere and an awesome vibe, and if this was like at least Rhea Lucaria sized, it would probably be one of my favorites in the game. But alas, it's pretty small, and while I do still enjoy it quite a bit, it's not as amazing as it could have been. Charo's Hidden Grave is an absolutely beautiful area with terrible content, and it's just such a waste. Probably the biggest missed opportunity. And while I disagree that Shadow of the Erdtree feels empty, I think there could be a tad bit more content, especially in places like Finger Runes. I rode through the Finger Runes for quite a long time, but I didn't find anything besides the meteor related stuff, which is also a big shame once again. Another thing I want to mention is Yori. Yori could have been a great gang fight. The potential is there, I definitely see the vision, and some of the attacks are really cool, but sadly they fumbled a few things, which really holds back this boss from becoming a pretty good or even great gang fight. And last but not least, I think especially two remembrances, Relana and Romina, need just a few little tiny tweaks to be even greater. For Relana, make her stand up from the chair like in this mod, give her this cool animation, and I would say her presentation is pretty good. And Romina the same. Either give her an animation she does at the beginning of it, or honestly, Romina deserves a cutscene, because these two bosses, especially Romina, feel very important, and just them standing there idly waiting for you to enter feels a bit off. But as you notice, these issues are all just little minor nitpicks, and they literally don't matter that much. I absolutely adore Shadow of the Erdtree, and even these tiny issues won't make it any less amazing. As critical as this entire video was, I really need to reiterate that Shadow of the Erdtree is my favorite From Software and gaming content in general. There are a lot of incredible things to discover, the DLC was incredible, the quest lines are incredible, the bosses are some of the best I've ever seen, the soundtrack is so good, every Remembrance soundtrack is S tier, the lore is amazing, everything about the Lands of Shadow is just so cool, and I would say From Software just definitely cooked with this. Putting this and Elden Ring base game together is not only my favorite Souls game, but also in my opinion the best game ever made, and Shadow of the Erdtree really just solidified it. So with that said, I absolutely love Shadow of the Erdtree, 10 out of 10. But please tell me in the comments what you think about Shadow of the Erdtree. Do you think my issues are justified, or do you disagree with some of them? Do you think there are way more issues? Please let me know. We can discuss this in the comments and have a nice discussion about this. But aside from that, this is everything from me. Thank you so much for watching, supporting, liking. It helps out the channel a ton, and once again, thank you. And with everything said, have a nice day. I hope I will see you here again next time, and bye.